Hi, everyone, and welcome to the STEM Lens series of Lunchtime live streams. I'm excited to have Dr. Madhur Anand with me today. The STEM Lens Lunchtime live stream is presented by talkSTEM in partnership with NEPRIS, and we're celebrating our virtual exhibition series called STEM Lens, where we feature contributions of images and short videos by girls and women of all ages and of all backgrounds. We invite you to access the virtual exhibition that you can visit absolutely freely, powered by Comerica on our website, talkstem.org. Dr. Madhur Anand, who is here with me today, is a full professor of ecology and sustainability at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, where she was appointed the inaugural director of the Guelph Institute for Environmental Research. She's also an author and has published a book of poems and a memoir with Penguin Random House, Canada. So Madhur, I'd love to kick it off by having a look at the photograph and your STEM question that you shared with us, and that will be up in next month's May's virtual exhibition, STEM Lens, which, by the way, is the final month of the series. May 31st is when the virtual exhibition series will end. Tell us more about this image that you shared and your STEM question.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. So this is a photograph I found on my desktop, and it's taken by myself during one of my trips to Brazil. I work with a number of collaborators and students on questions about a very endangered ecosystem there, the Atlantic forest. And so this was a photograph taken from the airplane, going from one city to another, I think from Sao Paulo to Porto Alegre in Brazil. And so what you can see here is, sort of a background of green, which is forest, and then human activity, which is destroying these forests here in the form of mining. And it's just one of many, many examples of the ways that humans interact with our environment. We require natural resources, but we also overexploit them. And I chose this photograph to send to you for the current exhibition because I wanted to highlight so many things that are coming into greater focus during the pandemic for many people. These are things that ecologists have known for a long time, but I think we're starting to kind of realize the interconnectedness of them, and indeed, like how we're all interrelated globally as well. So, just very briefly, one of the sources of emerging infectious diseases has to do with the loss of natural habitat, and often it's forests globally. So there's a very direct link in terms of answering this question of why is it more important than ever. There's a very important link to understand the emergence of infectious diseases like COVID-19 and habitat protection. Of course, there's so many other reasons and answers we can have to that question. And of course, I would challenge your viewers to come up with their own answers.
Absolutely. No, that's fascinating. I mean, yes, there's so many answers, but the connection between the times we're all living through and a place that for many of us seems so distant and far away and unreal almost is maybe not that distant and far away. And that's fantastic. And definitely would love to have, kids and teachers and anyone who sees Madhur's picture in question to ponder and share their thoughts with us. So tell us a little bit about ecology. A lot of the people who are watching this are educators, K through 12. What do you want our youth to understand about ecology and their relationship to this field of study?
Yeah, well, ecology, most simply defined, is the study of the interrelationships between organisms and between organisms and their environment. And I think what I would love for young people to think about, and teachers as well, is just the role of humans in that. So that, we are a part of the ecosystem. And while we can have a lot of negative impacts, we can also have a lot of positive impacts. And to maybe try to think of those in whatever field that you're going into, whether you're going into the sciences or the arts or business, ecology and sustainability is a lens that will be necessarily and increasingly a part of that work.
It's wonderful. And of course, I was thrilled that the timing worked out, because we've been featuring Earth Month in April for our Lunchtime live stream. So you're our last final Lunchtime live stream speaker. And we've been looking at these topics, sustainability in particular, earlier this month through the lens of design and architecture. And there's just, as you point out, so many disciplines and activities and fields of work that address the important topics. So as a professor of ecology and sustainability, and as director of the Guelph Institute of Environmental Research, what are some research questions that you're currently working on, or maybe that you've heard about that you think are really important?
Yeah, so a lot of my research actually over the past few years has turned very much towards the question of human behavior. And so, what struck me and still strikes me is that many times we know the science behind some sort of impact or some sort of relationship. We know, for example, what the effects of climate change is going to be on various species and on habitats. We even know what the effect is going to be on humans, largely. But we don't seem to be responding as a society to a lot of the science that is out there. And so what I've been working on are actually models that attempt to link together what we know, the scientific basis of ecological systems and climate systems, with models of human behavior, including the social aspects of human behavior, how humans learn and share information, and how important that can be for helping with sustainability.
Oh, yeah. So sort of a behavioral science intersection with all of the information that you already know and continue to get. Interesting, because ultimately it's us who can probably have the largest impact given where we are in history. So how did you come to focus on this particular area of the sciences, ecology first, and then, the current sub area that you're focused on right now? How did it all come to be?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm trained as an ecologist, so for the longest time in the sort of first stages of my career, I was very much like in the field, trying to understand. I sort of went to areas where there was really acute impacts of human activity. I studied the recovery of forests from mining and how to restore them. I studied the effects of climate change on forest ecosystems, and how just exactly the mechanisms through which species would migrate in response to climate change, which all our models were telling us was going to happen. And then, there came a point, and it was interestingly through a teaching lecture that I was giving it was for a course I was teaching called Current Issues in Forest Science. And I was preparing some sort of like large, big picture lenses on the problem. And I realized that, the major impact of deforestation, of human impact on deforestation globally, is not really logging or mining, but it's agriculture. And so it's very much has to do with our own like fundamental needs, right, to eat. So I found that there was, and then it occurred to me that if that's the case, then what's really important to understand better is this human-environment relationship. Simultaneously, there were so many global agreements being struck about the need to reduce emissions, to conserve biodiversity and to sort of curb the incredible decline of species that we're seeing. But the pace of, as I said, like the pace of response and policy and action around it was still very slow. And so I thought it was like a sudden shift for me. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my career continuing to understand and document this change, or do I want to actually try to effect change? And so that was just a very personal decision, and then it became a switch in my research program.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's something that I love that story, and I love sharing with young people that scientists are people first and scientists second, and so obviously your own life and preferences and who you are have everything to do with what you decide to study and how you do it. And that's important because I think there's just such stereotyping of maybe a lot of scientists in the media, who just are sort of very, very objective all the time. And I'm like, well, yes, of course, we strive towards objectivity, but fundamentally, it's a human endeavor and therefore prone to all of human, forces. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it's important to keep that in mind, particularly for the young people who think about this wide world of science. So switching, but maybe not switching. What I love about what you do is you have another side, what many people would consider a very different side, which is you write. So tell us about your writing. How did it come about, and how does your poetry and other writing, you have a new book, which I'm going to read this summer, relate to your work as a scientist, if at all, or does it? I think it'd be really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, well, I'll just tell quickly the anecdote of when I started to write poems, because it was quite late in my career. I was already an established scientist. I was in the final year of writing up my PhD thesis, which, for scientists, that's sort of the point at which you kind of move from being a student to becoming an independent researcher. And then you once you get your PhD, it's sort of this kind of this door you cross into becoming a student. Of course, you're a lifelong student, but you kind of enter into that realm of, okay, I'm on my own now. I am now capable of and trained to produce new scientific ideas and to potentially discover new things and push the frontiers of knowledge, right? So it's a very exciting time. And for me, I was writing it up, and but that was the moment for whatever reasons I also discovered poetry. I'm not going to say that I discovered I was a poet, because I guess I feel like perhaps I was a poet all along, but it was the point at which I started to write poems and started to take it seriously. And I think probably what was happening with my poetry was that I was starting to express that kind of feeling of reaching a point where I was supposed to know so much about this one topic, the topic of my PhD, and I was supposed to be reaching a certain level of certainty in my life and in my mind. But I was realizing that was just the beginning of an incredible unknown that was going to be in front of me, which would then be my 20-year career as a professor. And to me, that came out as poetry. And I continued to then write. And just like anything else in my life that I'm new to, that I'm trying to understand and learn about, I studied it, I read it, I took workshops and so on. And then after many years, my first book of poems was published and entitled A New Index for Predicting Catastrophes. And indeed, it does weave together scientific ideas, and it uses a lot of scientific knowledge, because by the time I was writing that, I was already basically fluent in that language, and there was no way to not have it in the work.
I think that you, Madhur, would be an inspiration to so many young people who enjoy the arts, whether it's writing or other kinds of, arts, performing, etc. I've met so many scientists who do all kinds of interesting things. Maybe they're not published authors, but they do all kinds of different interesting things that most people wouldn't consider to be in line with being this objective scientist. So I have to say personally, I love to dispel that myth. So thank you so much for being here and sharing that. Science is this constant curiosity that you have. It's certainly problem solving, and it certainly is expressed in a diverse set of ways, and you've included poetry and memoir writing as ways of expressing the science that you understand and wonder about. So I think that's truly inspirational. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.